Hi friends, today I wanted to share with you a deck that I just received for the first time today. Ordered the pocket size so that I could carry it with me in my purse wherever I go. They also have a standard size and they have an extra large size. And the extra large size of this Thoth deck is really worth getting because the images are just very gorgeous, just beautiful. And you like to drink in the beauty of the cards, and you'll see what I mean as we go along here. So this deck comes in a flip top box. I got mine from Amazon.com. It was less than $20. So well worth the price. This is an iconic deck. Now the Rider-Waite Smith deck precedes this deck by about 40 years. And this deck has some similarities to Rider-Waite, but it has a lot of significant differences too. Along with your deck, you get a little white book. And if you're familiar with Thoth Tarot at all, you know that there are a multitude of books on the market that will really go in depth to the symbols and the meanings of the cards and the significance of the artwork. But this will give you, you know, your bare bones little white book meanings of the cards. So that's that. And we also have a message from Aleister Crowley, he is a ceremonial magic practitioner from about 100 years ago and a very controversial figure in his time associated with ceremonial high magic. Now the backs of the cards have a sort of a symbol that's familiar. You may generally know the Rosy Dawn tradition of the Golden Dawn, Rosicrucianism. I'm not overly familiar with all the secrets of those groups, but I know that this is a symbol that's associated with some of them. So you can see that this is not a reversible deck. So it's only meant to be not necessarily read with reversals, but I suppose you could do that with any deck if you wanted to. Now we'll go to the major arcana. I'm going to just briefly show you the cards because you may have seen them already and you're probably familiar with Rider-Waite cards, and these are, the major arcana is very similar. There are a couple of differences that I'll point out when we get to them. But here's the Fool, and there's the Magus or Magician, and you can see that he's got all the same elements, symbols of the elements there as we had in the Rider-Waite Magician. The High Priestess behind her veil. We've kind of got an idea of the pillars back there of severity and mercy. The Empress. It's a beautiful Empress. I love this card. Really gives you that nature connection. The Emperor, very foursquare, monochromatic, very ordered. The Hierophant. There is the Lovers. The Chariot, that's very, very similar to Rider-Waite. Now, one difference between the Thoth deck and the Rider-Waite Smith is that number 8 in Rider-Waite is strength, and it shows a woman with a lion, whereas number 8 in Thoth is called adjustment. And this would be the equivalent to number 11 in Rider-Waite, which is justice. So you can see the scales of justice here. And instead of calling it justice, we call it adjustment. So that's a bit of a difference. Number 9, the Hermit. Really beautiful. The light and movement here that you get from the Hermit's lantern. You can see the figure of the hermit behind, and this is the lantern and the light emanating. It's just beautiful. Number 10, the Wheel of Fortune. Now number 11 in this deck corresponds to Rider-Waite Smith number 8, Strength. Only in the Thoth deck they call this card Lust. So to me it kind of makes sense to put this at number 11 because 11 is considered a 1 card, and 1s are very energetic. So that kind of makes sense. And then The 8 makes sense to me for justice because 8 is a card of order and structure and achievement and building on something, and that sort of corresponds to justice in my mind, so I like that. I like the way this deck is organized. Number 12, the Hanged Man. Similar to every other deck that you've seen, I'm sure. Number 13, Death. And there's such rich symbolism in all these cards, you really would have to invest in a separate book. I know there are books with many hundreds of pages devoted to the Thoth deck. So if you're interested, run and grab one and you can really read in depth on the subject. Now, instead of Temperance, it's a very similar image to Temperance. We see the woman pouring the elements and making a merge of those two elements in the pot there. So that's what we would think of as being Temperance, but in this deck it's called Art. So it's a card of creativity. Here is the Devil. We've got the Cernunnos horns and a goat and people below here that are kind of enslaved by their baser instincts and desires. Number 16, the Tower. You get that sense of ruin, and you don't actually see a tower per se, but you see the all-knowing eye above, and you see the ruination that has happened. That's the Tower. Here's the Star. A very beautiful representation of the star. Really lovely. There's a lot of movement in these cards and abstractism that's just really makes you want to just stare and let your imagination run. Just beautiful. There is the Moon. Now instead of the dogs, we have jackals and kind of jackal men there, which would mesh more with an Egyptian background rather than, say, your Celtic or the more traditional Rider-Waite imagery with the dogs. So that's kind of different. The Moon. We still have the element of water here, pouring. There's the Sun. The Eon, which corresponds to judgment. We can see the souls here, and we see a spirit. We see the God figure. And instead of the world, we have the universe to symbolize completion. Very nice. Alrighty. Now I've laid out the court cards here because I need to explain to you a difference from the Thoth deck to the Rider-Waite Smith. In the Thoth, instead of page, knight, queen, and king, we have princess, prince, queen, which is the same, and then instead of king, the knight is the king. And this can be kind of confusing because the knights in the Thoth deck are pictured riding horses, and that's, if you're familiar with Rider-Waite, that's the knight card that would be associated with the page and the knight. But actually in this deck you have to bear in mind that the knights on the horses are not knights in the traditional way that we've looked at them with the Rider-Waite Smith. These are the equivalent of the kings. So that takes a little getting used to. So there are the wands, Princess of Wands, Prince of Wands, the Queen of Wands, which is just gorgeous, and the Knight of Wands. Going to the cups, Princess of Cups, which would be the equivalent of the Page of Cups, Prince of Cups, the Queen of Cups. Just look at that. So beautiful. And the Knight of Cups, which is, remember now, this is a king. This is not knight like you're used to reading with the other decks. So that's the suit of cups, court cards from cups. Now you have the swords, Princess of Swords, kind of a warrior princess. The Prince of Swords, the Queen of Swords. I love how she's in the clouds and in the air. And the Knight of Swords, riding his horse through the heavens. Really beautiful. Love those. This is a great deck. Okay, then for the suit of coins or pentacles, in this deck it is known as discs. So this is the Princess of Discs. We get an earthy feeling with this suit. There's the Prince of Discs with the bull. Taurus or Taurian association with Earth. The Queen of Discs. And the Knight, which would be the King, but this deck calls it the Knight of Discs. So those are the court cards, so you can get a little idea of the differences between the Thoth and Rider-Waite as far as the court cards. Then I want to just show you the aces. Ace of Wands. Aces are always fun to look at in all the decks because they're usually so beautifully done. Ace of Cups. Just wonderful. Ace of Swords. And the Ace of Discs. Now let's move on to the twos. I'm sort of making a mess here. Now, another interesting aspect of this deck is the minor arcana has keywords associated with them. Now, whereas with Rider-Waite, you have a kind of a story and a cartoon image. With this deck, you have more of almost a pip feel, but they're more illustrative than regular plain pips. So this Two of Wands, Dominion, Three of Wands, Virtue, whereas with Rider-Waite, you see the gentleman waiting for the ship to come in or to arrive with his reward. And in a way, you can think of it the same way. If you're a virtuous person, perhaps you're deserving of a reward. So, you know, I mean, if you sit and think about the deeper meanings, sometimes you can make that connection. The Four of Wands, completion. Five of Wands, strife, very similar to Rider-Waite. Six of Wands, victory, same thing as Rider-Waite. Seven of Wands, valor, and in Rider-Waite you see the guy fighting off the others trying to topple him down from his place in the world. So if you look at it that way, that's sort of maintaining your valor, fighting against the way things shouldn't be. Number 8, swiftness, same thing as Rider-Waite, where they show 8 wands flying through the air. That has a similar meaning, swiftness. 9 of Wands, strength. And 10 of Wands, oppression. So as you can see, loosely the cards are similar to Rider-Waite, very loosely. Alrighty, then let's move along. Let's look at the swords. I like the sword suit in this deck has really got nice ones. Two of Swords, which has traditionally been thought of as a truce or choice or a crossroads, and in this deck it's a similar image, but its keyword is peace. Three of Swords, sorrow, so very similar to Rider-Waite. Four of Swords, truce. And you know, in the Rider-Waite deck you see the knight in a resting phase, so a rest or a truce is kind of a similar idea. Five of Swords, defeat. Six of Swords, science. So that's kind of a little different spin on it than the Rider-Waite deck. I think the Six of Swords in Rider-Waite shows people sailing off, and you take it as sort of like a rest from a battle or something of that nature, whereas this deck regards the Six of Swords as science. So that's kind of a difference. Seven of Swords, futility. And the Seven of Swords in Rider-Waite is kind of regarded as a card of treachery or stealth. So futility can kind of be regarded along as the same deeper type of a meaning. Eight of Swords, interference. Now, Eight of Swords in your Rider-Waite has the sword surrounding a woman, and she's bound and blindfolded and feels like she can't move, but yet she could if she really wanted to. So this is a similar meaning, interference. Eight of Swords. Nine of Swords, cruelty. And 10 of Swords, ruin. And I kind of like the fact that we don't have so many decks have the 10 swords stuck into a body. And, you know, I just hate that image. It's just too much. It's over the top. 10 of Swords, ruin. Okay. Now we have the cups, the suit of cups. Two of Cups, love. Very similar to Rider-Waite. Three, abundance. Conviviality. Four of Cups, luxury. And in Rider-Waite, they sort of depict this as a card where you may have luxury, but you're kind of bored and have a sense of ennui and a stagnation. So this is kind of nice, luxury. Five of Cups, disappointment. Very similar to Rider-Waite with the spilled cups. Six of Cups, pleasure, whereas in Rider-Waite it's considered a card of remembrance, fond memories. So it's kind of similar, pleasure. Seven of Cups, debauch, whereas Seven of Cups in Rider-Waite you see all the choices or all the different illusions. Debauch. Eight of Cups, indolence. Eight of Cups in Rider-Waite shows someone walking away from the Eight Cups. Nine of Cups, happiness, similar to Rider-Waite. And 10 of Cups, satiety. Whereas the 10 of Cups in Rider-Waite shows a happy family, and I guess it's sort of a similar meaning. You have a very full life. You're satisfied. Alrighty, then to the discs. We already saw the aces, so I'm not showing those again, but here we have the Two of Discs, change. And in Rider-Waite, it's looking at two elements there that they're balancing or trying to achieve that measure of balance or choice or change. Three of Discs, works, kind of the apprentice card. Four of Discs, power. Now, Four of Discs in Rider-Waite sort of depicts someone who's greedy and hanging on to what they have, but you can also regard it as you're building a foundation of your power and you're accumulating what you need to be successful. So I kind of like that this one has a more general meaning rather than a more simplified meaning. Five of Discs is worry. And you know, Five of Discs in the Rider-Waite shows the people that have become impoverished or, you know, lost their money, gone bankrupt or whatever, outside of a church, kind of waiting for someone to help them out. So that's beyond worry, but it's the same general idea. And the Six of Cups is success. Now, Six of Cups in Rider-Waite, not only are you successful, but you're sort of spreading the wealth and sharing with others. But the general meaning is the same, success. Seven of Discs, failure. I think that's quite different from Rider-Waite. Rider-Waite, they have the guy in the field and he's got his seven plants, sort of tending his garden and kind of working on going ahead to the future. But this card meaning is failure, so for what it's worth. And now we have the Eight of Discs, prudence. And whereas the Eight of Discs in Rider-Waite is considered to be a card of accomplishment, you've become adept at your craft, you're experienced. I don't know, this meaning of prudence. I guess it's kind of similar in a way. You can consider yourself, if you're successful and moving in the right direction and you're prudent and you know the right moves to make, so you've done well by yourself. Nine of Discs, gain. In Rider-Waite, they show the woman in the beautiful garden and she's enjoying the fruits of her labor. So this is gain. And the Ten of Discs, wealth. Very similar meaning to Rider-Waite, where we have, it's kind of the idea of an inheritance, or you've gained wealth and you have a legacy to leave to your heirs. So I hope you've enjoyed this little run through of the Thoth deck. I have the pocket deck. As I said, I really like the images on these cards, and I'm thinking I may need to get the large version to enjoy at home. But anyway, I have this one for now to carry with me, and hopefully I'll get a more in-depth book of Thoth Tarot and learn really more what I'm doing with it. So I'll have a better idea of what I'm talking to you about. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the run through of the cards, and we'll talk to you again in the future. Thank you.